Hey everyone, how are you doing? Believe it or not, I just went through a nor'easter when last week I had a hurricane. Summer followed immediately by winter, and it's supposed to be 60 degrees on Saturday, so I don't understand Mother Nature. But what I do understand is that we're up to the fourth part of Sexing the Cherry. I hope you guys are excited. This is the chapter called The Story of the 12 Dancing Princesses. So I'm looking forward to finding out some more information about some dancing princesses. Alright, let's get to it. I banged on the door and heard a voice behind me asking my name. My name is Jordan, I said, though not knowing to whom. Down here. There was a well by the door with a frayed rope and a rusty bucket. Are you looking for me? I explained to the head now poking over the edge of the well that I had come to pay my respects to the 12 dancing princesses. You can start here then, said the head. I am the eldest. Timidly, for I have a fear of confined spaces, I swung over the edge and climbed down a wooden ladder. I found myself in a circular room, well furnished, with a silver jug coming to the boil with fresh coffee. I've brought you some herrings, I said, awkwardly. At the word herring there was a sound of great delight, and a hand came over my shoulder and took the whole parcel. Please excuse her, said the princess. She is a mermaid. Already the mermaid, who was very beautiful but without fine graces, was gobbling the fish, dropping them back into her throat the way you or I would an oyster. It is the penalty of love, sighed the princess, and began at once to tell me the story of her life. We all slept in the same room, my sisters and I, and that room was narrower than a new river and longer than the beard of the prophet. So you see exactly the kind of quarters we had. We slept in white beds with white sheets, and the moon shone through the window and made white shadows on the floor. From this room, every night, we flew to a silver city where no one ate or drank. The occupation of the people was to dance. We wore out our dresses and slippers dancing, but because we were always sound asleep when our father came to wake us in the morning, it was impossible to fathom where we had been or how. You know that eventually a clever prince caught us flying through the window. We had given him a sleeping draught, but he only pretended to drink it. He had 11 brothers, and we were all given in marriage, one to each brother, and as it says, lived happily ever after. We did, but not with our husbands. I have always enjoyed swimming, and it was in deep waters one day that I came to a coral cave and saw a mermaid combing her hair. I fell in love with her at once, and after a few months of illicit meetings, my husband complaining all the time that I stank of fish, I ran away and began housekeeping with her in perfect salty bliss. For some years I did not hear from my sisters, and then, by a strange eventuality, I discovered that we had all, in one way or another, parted from the glorious princes and were living scattered, according to our tastes. We bought this house, and we share it. You will find my sisters as you walk about. As you can see, I live in the well. That's my last husband painted on the wall, said the second princess, looking as though he were alive. She took me through her glass house, showing me curiosities, the stillborn fetus of the infamous Pope Joan who had so successfully posed as a man of God until giving birth in the Easter parade. She had the tablets of stone on which Moses had received the 10 Commandments. The writing was blurred, but it was easy to make out the gouged lines of the finger of God. I collect religious items. She had not minded her husband much more than any wife does until he had tried to stop her hobby. He built a bonfire and burned the body of a saint. The saint was very old and wrapped in cloth. I liked him about the house. He added something. After that she had wrapped her own husband in cloth and got on wrapping the stale bandages round and round until she reached his nose. She had a moment's regret, and continued. He walked in beauty, she said. His eyes were brown marshes, his lashes were like willow trees, his eyebrows shot together made a dam between his forehead and his face, his cheeks were steep and sheer, his mouth was a volcano. His breath was like a dragon's, and his heart was torn from a bull. The sinews in his neck were white columns leading to the bolts of his collarbone. I can still trace the cavity of his throat. His chest was a strong box, His ribs were made out of brass. They shone through his skin when the sun was out. His shoulder blades were mountain ranges, his spine a cobbled road. His belly was filled with jewels, and his cock woke at dawn. Fields of wheat still remind me of his hair, and when I see a hand whose fingers are longer than its palm, I think it might be him come to touch me again. But he never touched me. It was a boy he loved. I pierced them with a single arrow where they lay. I still think it was poetic. My husband married me so that his liaisons with other women, being forbidden, would be more exciting. Danger was an aphrodisiac to him. He wanted nothing easy or gentle. His way was to cause whirlwinds. I was warned, we always are, by well-wishers or malcontents, but I chose to take no interest in gossip. My husband was handsome and clever. What did it matter if he needed a certain kind of outlet, so long as he loved me? I wanted to love him. I was determined to be happy with him. I had not been happy before. At first I hardly minded his weeks away. I did not realize that part of his sport was to make me mad. Only then, when he had hurt me, could he fully enjoy the other beds he visited. I soon discovered that the women he preferred were the inmates of a lunatic asylum. With them he arranged mock marriages in deserted barns. They wore a shroud as their wedding dress and carried a bunch of carrots as a bouquet. He had them straight after on a pig trout altar. Most were virgins. He liked to come home to me smelling of their blood. Does the body hate itself so much that it seeks release at any cost? I didn't kill him. I left him to walk the battlements of his ruined kingdom. His body was rattled with disease. The same winter he was found dead in the snow. Why could he not turn his life towards me, as trees, though troubled by the wind, yet continue in the path of the sun? You may have heard of Rapunzel. Against the wishes of her family, who can best be described by their passion for collecting miniature dolls, she went to live in a tower with an older woman. Her family were so incensed by her refusal to marry the prince next door that they vilified the couple, calling one a witch and the other a little girl. Not content with names, they ceaselessly tried to break into the tower, so much so that the happy pair had to seal up any entrance that was not on a level with the sky. The lover got in by climbing up Rapunzel's hair, and Rapunzel got in by nailing a wig to the floor and shinning up the tresses flung out of the window. Both of them could have used a ladder, but they were in love. One day the prince, who had always liked to borrow his mother's frocks, dressed up as Rapunzel's lover and dragged himself into the tower. Once inside, he tied her up and waited for the wicked witch to arrive. The moment she leaped through the window, bringing their dinner for the evening, the prince hit her over the head and threw her out again. Then he carried Rapunzel down the rope he had brought with him and forced her to watch while he blinded her broken lover in a field of thorns. After that they lived happily ever after, of course. As for me, my body healed, though my eyes never did, and eventually I was found by my sisters, who had come in their various ways to live on this estate. My own husband? Oh well, the first time I kissed him he turned into a frog. There he is, just by your foot. His name's Anton. On New Year's Day, walking through the deep lanes slatted with light, I saw my husband on horseback, wearing his pink coat. He held his hunting horn to his lips and stood in the stirrups. The hunt rode off. Soon they were only as big as holly berries hidden in the green. I walked on, away from the path, through bushes and brambles, frightening partridges and threading a route between the patient cattle whose hooves in the mud were braceleted with beads of water. My boots were thick with mud. Every step was harder and harder to take. Soon I was lifting my feet as you would to climb a ladder. I was hungry and sweating. I wanted to get home, but I couldn't hurry. I had to get home to fetch the punch into the great hall and fire it with bright blue flames. Coming with much difficulty to the top of a hill, I looked across the widening valley and saw where the snow still patched the fields like sheets left out to dry. I loved the thorn hedges and the trees bare overnight, as though some child had stubbornly collected all the leaves, refusing to leave even one for a rival. I saw my own house, its chimneys smoking, its windows orange. Another year. Then a stag and 5 deer came out of the wood and across the fields in front of my eyes. The fields were fenced, and the stag jumped over, turning his head to bring the others. Just for a second he remained in the air, but in that second of flight, I remembered my past, when I had been free to fly, long ago, before this gracious landing in a house full of things. He disappeared into the dark, and I turned my back on the house. The last thing I heard was the sound of the hunt clattering into the courtyard. I never wanted anyone but her. I wanted to run my finger from the cleft in her chin down the slope of her breasts and across the level plains of her stomach to where I knew she would be wet. I wanted to turn her over and ski the flats of my hands down the slope of her back. I wanted to pioneer the secret passage of her arse. When she lay down, I massaged her feet with mint oil and cut her toenails with silver scissors. I coiled her hair into living snakes and polished her teeth with my saliva. I pierced her ears and filled them with diamonds. I dropped belladonna in her eyes. When she was sick, I wiped her fever with my own towels, and when she cried, I kept her tears in a Ming vase. There was no separation between us. We rose in the morning and slept at night as twins do. We had 4 arms and 4 legs, and in the afternoons, when we read in the cool orchard, we did so sitting back to back. I liked to feel the snake of her spine. We kissed often, our mouths filling up with tongue and teeth, and spit and blood when I bit her lower lip, and with my hands I held her against my hip bone. We made love often, especially in the afternoons with the blinds half pulled and the cold flag floor against our bodies. For 18 years we lived alone in a windy castle and saw no one but each other. Then someone found us, and then it was too late. The man I had married was a woman. They came to burn her. I killed her with a single blow to the head before they reached the gates, and fled the place, and am come here now. I still have a coil of her hair. We had been married a few years when a man came to the door selling brushes. My husband was at work, so I let the man into our kitchen and gave him something to eat. I asked him to show me his bag, and he spread out, as you would imagine, a layer of polishing clothes, a layer of round soaps, combs for the hair, combs for the beard of a billy goat, ordinary household things. I bought 1 or 2 useful pieces, then I asked him what he had in his other bag, the one he hadn't opened. "What was it you wanted?" he asked. "Poison." "Yes, for the rats." "No, for my husband." He seemed unsurprised by my intention to murder and opened the other bag. I looked inside. It was full of little jars and sealed bags. "Is your husband a big man?" "Very. He is very, very fat. He is the fattest man in the village. He has always been fat. He has 11 brothers, all of whom are as slender as spring corn. Every day he eats 1 cow, followed by 1 pig." "You are right to kill him," said the man. "Put this in his milk at bedtime." Bedtime came, and I stirred my husband's vat of milk and put in the powder as directed. My husband came crashing over to the stove and gulped the milk in 1 draught. As soon as he had finished, he began to swell up. He swelled out of the house, cracking the roof, and within a few moments had exploded. Out of his belly came a herd of cattle and a fleet of pigs, all blinking in the light and covered in milk. He had always complained about his digestion. I rounded them up and set off to find my sisters. I prefer farming to cookery. He called me Jess because that is the name of the hood which restrains the falcon. I was his falcon. I hung on his arm and fed at his hand. He said my nose was sharp and cruel, and that my eyes had madness in them. He said I would tear him to pieces if he dealt softly with me. At night, if he was away, he had me chained to our bed. It was a long chain, long enough for me to use the chamber pot or to stand at the window and wait for the late owls. I loved to hear the owls. I loved to see the sudden glide of wings spread out for prey, and then the dip and the noise like a lover in pain. He used the chain when we were riding together. I had a horse as strong as his, and he'd whip the horse from behind and send it charging through the trees, and he'd follow, half a head behind, pulling on the chain and asking me how I liked my ride. His game was to have me sit astride him when he made love, and hold me tight in the small of my back. He said he had to have me above him, in case I picked his eyes out in the faltering candlelight. I was none of these things, but I became them. At night, in June, I think, I flew off his wrist and tore his liver from his body, and bit my chain in pieces and left him on the bed with his eyes open. He looked surprised. I don't know why. As your lover describes you, so you are. When my husband had an affair with someone else, I watched his eyes glaze over when we ate dinner together, and I heard him singing to himself without me, and when he tended the garden, it was not for me. He was courteous and polite. He enjoyed being at home, but in the fantasy of his home I was not the one who sat opposite him and laughed at his jokes. He didn't want to change anything. He liked his wife. The only thing he wanted to change was me. It would have been better if he had hated me, or if he had abused me, or if he had packed his new suitcases and left. As it was, he continued to put his arm round me and talk about building a new wall to replace the rotten fence that divided our garden from his vegetable patch. I knew he would never leave our house. He had worked for it. Day by day, I felt myself disappearing. For my husband, I was no longer a reality. I was one of the things around him. I was the fence which needed to be replaced. I watched myself in the mirror and saw that I was no longer vivid and exciting. I was worn and gray like an old sweater you can't throw out, but won't put on. He admitted he was in love with her, but he had said he loved me. Translated, that means, I want everything. Translated, that means, I don't want to hurt you yet. Translated, that means, I don't know what to do, give me time. Why should I give you time? What time are you giving me? I am in a cell waiting to be called for execution. I loved him, and I was in love with him. I didn't use language to make a war zone of my heart. You're so simple and good, he said, brushing the hair from my face. He meant, your emotions are not complex like mine. My dilemma is poetic. But there was no dilemma. He no longer wanted me, but he wanted our life. Eventually, when he had been away with her for a few days and returned restless and conciliatory, I decided not to wait in my cell any longer. I went to where he was sleeping in another room and I asked him to leave. Very patiently, he asked me to remember that the house was his home, that he couldn't be expected to make himself homeless because he was in love. Medea did, I said, and Romeo and Juliet, and Cressida and Ruth in the Bible. He asked me to shut up. He wasn't a hero. Then why should I be a heroine? He didn't answer. He plucked at the blanket. I considered my choices. I could stay and be unhappy and humiliated. I could leave and be unhappy and dignified. I could beg him to touch me again. I could live in hope and die of bitterness. I took some things and left. It wasn't easy. It was my home too. I hear he's replaced the back fence. As soon as we were married, my husband took me to his family home, far from anyone I knew. He promised me a companion in the library, but asked me never to interrupt him during the day. I saw him at night for a few hours, over our dinner, though he never ate much, nor did he seem anxious to decorate my bed with his body. I asked him what he did during the day, and he said he exercised his mind over the problems of creation. I realized this could take some time, and resigned myself to forgetting the rules of normal life. One night, as we were eating a pigeon I had shot, my husband stood up and said, "There is a black tower where wild beasts live. The tower has no windows and no doors. No one may enter or leave. At the top of the tower is a cage whose bars are made of bone. From this cage, a trapped spirit peeps at the sun. The tower is my body, the cage is my skull. The spirit singing to comfort itself is me. But I am not comforted. I am alone. Kill me." I did as he asked. I smashed his skull with a silver candlestick, and I heard a hissing noise like damp wood on the fire. I opened the doors and dragged his body into the air, and in the air he flew away. I still see him sometimes, but only in the distance. Their stories ended, the 12 dancing princesses invited me to spend the night as their guest. "Someone is missing," I said. "There are only 11 of you, and I have only heard 11 stories. Where is your sister?" They looked at one another. Then the eldest said, Our youngest sister is not here. She never came to live with us. On her wedding day to the prince who had discovered our secret, she flew from the altar like a bird from a snare, and walked a tightrope between the steeple of the church and the mast of a ship weighing anchor in the bay. She was, of all of us, the best dancer, the one who made her body into shapes we could not follow. She did it for pleasure, but there was something more for her. She did it because any other life would have been a lie. She didn't burn in secret with a passion she could not express. She shone. We have not seen her for years and years, not since that day when we were dressed in red with our black hair unbraided. She must be old now. She must be stiff. Her body can only be a memory. The body she has will not be the body she had. Do you remember, said another sister, how light she was? She was so light that she could climb down a rope, cut it, and tie it again in midair without plunging to her death. The wind supported her. What was her name? Fortunata. And that's the end of the story of the 12 Dancing Princesses. What did you think of this particular chapter, this section? I liked hearing the different princesses' stories, and some of them are kind of sad, like the man who was cheating on the woman, but none of them really seemed happy, which is very sad for a variety of reasons. I'm interested to see if Jordan can find the 12th princess who is the dancer that he's looking for, and her name is Fortunata, as we've just learned. What did you guys think of this chapter? Let me know everything you're thinking in the comments below, and make predictions for what's going to happen later. Tell me what you think, everything. I want to hear it and talk about it with you. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Have a great day.